I didn't see them.
I'll do my best. How's that at the outset? Thanks for reminding me.
All right.
Are you all set? Okay, so if I may, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item on our agenda is planning for our public forum, which will occur at 6 p.m. Kevin reminds me that we may not all have been here at the last meeting, so let's talk about briefly what the discussion was at the end of the last meeting. The discussion at the end of the last meeting was that we would hold a public forum, that we would post advertisements of it on Front Porch Forum and our website, to invite public comment on the preliminary draft report that we have prepared. It was also thought that this would be a good opportunity, if we could, to actually answer questions that people have, because there have been times when people have had questions that required more elaborate responses than we could make within the public comment time that was allowed in our meetings. The chief purpose of tonight's meeting is to truly provide an opportunity for public comment in response to the inquiries of the members of the public. There will be times, I expect tonight, where people make points that may require some clarification from the committee in terms of other viewpoints that they might consider. But the hope and the thought is not that this be a free-ranging, free-for-all debate, but that it really be focused on soliciting the comments and answering questions, and at some critical points providing input from us as a committee. We have prepared on the assumption, subject to your pleasure as a committee, that I had drawn the short straw and would be responsible for making a presentation and chiefly answering the comments or questions that folks have, although I will not hesitate to call on members of this committee and our staff if need be. The format for the evening is that we contemplate, of course subject to your pleasure, is that we will make a very brief presentation, which is described in the PowerPoint that we have here, that will in essence outline in a very thumbnail fashion what the history of our study process has been, the history of the RED study process, the governance structure that we have now, the governance structure that will be implemented if we were to go forward, and open the floor up for comments thereafter. We have made arrangements, of course, for a very professional minute taker, as you know. We get very good minutes, and our intention is that will, if at any point you hear a comment from somebody where you haven't gotten their question, you are absolutely free to look at me or the person and say, I didn't get that, could you please repeat that? Okay? Because part of our purpose is to make sure that we have recorded everything that we can that people want to comment. We've also dragooned for Harry into a role that he has done before, I think, very effectively. Harry will be taking summary notes on large sheets of paper there and posting them around the room. Now the purpose for this is so that we can actually get, in a very summary fashion, something that we can see as the evening unfolds, and see what people's comments, questions, and concerns are in very summary fashion, and not have to wait a few minutes. And it's also a way for us to some degree, have people understand that we have at least understood them because we're able to write down some portion of their concerns. And that way I'm hoping that we will truly understand better what people are saying, and that we'll be able to respond to them more effectively. We are providing to everybody a copy of the introduction to planning report, the preliminary draft, and the timeline. And let's see what else we want to go over. John, Jim, am I missing anything? Okay. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor to the committee to see if your comments, questions, suggestions, how you recraft it. The floor is yours.
So people, we're not handing out copies of the articles tonight?
We are.
Oh, okay.
We are.
They're on the table over there.
All right, all right. I'd be interested in knowing how things are going with the board meetings.
I can't, Diana and I can't report because MMU has not met yet. A week ahead of time is a lot. Next week.
Right. Well,
So we don't have anything to report yet.
Underhill meets tomorrow.
Bolton
Bolton
meets
meets
on
on Wednesday. Huntington meets next Tuesday. Next Wednesday is Jericho, then MMU.
ID's already met.
The ID's only more than that.
Maybe Kevin would like to tell us how that went.
And Richmond met.
Richmond, we're going to reschedule. Their timeline doesn't work, so we told the board and we're trying to get a meeting in before the 6th.
So, yeah, we met, we also had a couple people from the Underhill town school board there. No members of the public were there. Got all the feedback from the board, and then one person gave us some feedback offline, and consolidated it and sent it to Michael and Jim yesterday.
I haven't had a chance to.
So, only suggestion might be to, multiple formats of different feedback are coming in. If we had any recommendation how best to consolidate the feedback, I just said page number, here's the comment. But you could get, conflicting pieces of feedback, right, from different public members, and I brought it all together. I think all my feedback didn't conflict, right? So most of it was editorial, clarification, administrative. The only one finding that somebody talked about was the number of board members per district. So when you do the math according to how Article 9 says it, you round it, you come up with a different result than what we had. So you might want to look at that. But everything else was just suggestions on how to add more clarity. The article.
Other thoughts about tonight's meeting, and then I'd like to elaborate on Katie's comment.
I have one thought on tonight's meeting that I'm thinking about this delicately, but I'm hoping that we're going to have new faces coming forward to speak to us. I want to make sure that members of the public have not spoken or addressed the meeting before, that they get some priority.
Well, what I plan to do is use a sign-in sheet, and just, I don't know if we're going to have 2 people, 10, or 100. But depending on how many people sign in, it suggests they want to make comments, something that they'll have to do.
I'd be interested in knowing what town people are coming from.
When they speak, Chuck?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
And I think that if there are, if someone just has more than can be accomplished at this meeting, if we could make an arrangement that someone from that town could meet with them offline, or somehow, if there's more than we can get done here with an individual, that we offer to meet. If somebody comes here and they just need more time, that people from that town offer to spend time.
Is that everybody in concurrence with that? I mean, and feel free to make that offer at any point. That's a great idea.
And also, I think it would be good if you could let people, we could let people know that they could also go to the next board meeting. So the next board meeting of every board with the exception of Underhill AD is to get this as an agenda. Yeah, we can make that clear.
That's it.
They
If
can
I
go to
missed
our
that,
blog.
please remind me of it.
They can go to our the blog too if they have comments they want to make.
Other thoughts about tonight's public meeting? I'm going to suspend the rules to briefly recognize you, although it's not community
I'm just going
time.
to say, I'm not rude, but if you keep this fan on, I can't hear, and they won't be able to hear either.
So, all right.
So is it going to be too hot if you turn it off later?
I'm going to have to defer to our building maestros, such as they are.
Oh, we can turn it off.
Well, I stand it now, but it's too much. That's why
Maybe
I
we
moved
could
up
move
here.
it away and still get the air but have the sound more distant.
I moved up here because it was way too much for the hearing. to go.
Okay, no, thank you for raising that.
Are you
Other-
going to be amplified?
It can be.
I would hope it's not needed, but I can be if I'm not hurt.
If there's only 10 or 12 people, let's have, push their chairs.
And we can, and I think we could shut off the fans if we need to. It wouldn't be unbearable.
Can
we open the windows?
But this one's going right on us, especially.
I'll try that one too.
Can we open windows?
I defer to Jim and John on whether that makes sense because we don't use this room enough on the board level for me to know whether that helps or hurts.
Shouldn't, because of the sun beats on it.
Okay, then I trust your judgment. Other thoughts about the public portion of the meeting tonight?
Michael, I'm wondering about how you'll, if you want others from your perspective, how you make decisions. Also wondering if there are folks in the community who are more comfortable.
Well, I don't have a precise script in mind. I'm approaching this with the thought that we do have diverse viewpoints in our committee. We have diverse viewpoints in our committee, in our community. I don't want to stifle any of the voices on this committee. Far from it, but I also want to make sure that our primary focus is on allowing people to make their comments. So I guess what I'd say is I'd ask the committee members, and we'll have to trust each other's judgment on this, to pick your spots if you choose to ask for recognition from me very carefully. Be mindful that there maybe are some points that you're thinking of that are critical, that really need to be put out there. But also be mindful that the purpose of this is not to win every debating point. The purpose of this is to truly listen and to engage people. And so we're just going to have to, in my mind, I know that's not a satisfactory answer, Brett, but it's the best I can come up with. I wouldn't be shocked if at some point I say something that people in this committee say, wait a second, you just missed this, or you've misstated something. And if you feel there's really a need to address that, ask for recognition. But have in mind the primary purpose of tonight, which is what I'd ask all of you to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied.
And I'll apologize in advance for my limitations. Hopefully this is a hard job to do, and hopefully I do it well. Yes,
I
Meg.
apologize, I kind of just I was at the last meeting, folks were three of us asking things that I had heard, as well as things that I had presented regarding terms questions. That I thought we ought to have some coverage in introduction. Remember that?
Well, I remember the subject coming up, but I don't remember the committee deciding that the introduction should be revised. I remember that being an open question.
Yes. Now, my recollection is that please write something up. There will be no guarantee it will be accepted. Thank you. I got the nod of the head, several people, and yes, for the time. So I did write something up. I apologize. It's a busy time of year. I didn't have time to send it out to you. I do have that, and I pass that around if people are interested or not.
Well, I think that it would be fine for you to pass it around. I don't think it would be fine for us to take that up as an action item tonight.
Yeah.
But I think it would be fine for you to pass it out. And can we have it attached to the meeting minutes so that the public gets to see it as well? Max, are you comfortable that you had enough time to polish that, or did you want to wait
It's
a
not
little
a
longer?
polished document at all. It is my first stab at trying to voice what wasn't voiced in the introduction. I
So-
mean, ideally, it'd be nice to have 2 or 3 people working together and truly reviewing what had been said and offered. And I did not have time to do a polished document.
So let me give you options, and you just select the one that makes sense for you. One option is to pass it out tonight and have it attached to the minutes with the knowledge that you haven't had a chance to polish it, and maybe there will be a version 2 coming. It will, however, be published and be available immediately as a public document. The other option you have is if you'd rather take some time, and probably not a lot of time, because you want this thought about before our next scheduled meeting, I presume.
Well, I wasn't sure if the timeline was even going to allow any changes, so I figured I better get something here tonight.
I'm quite sure that there will be a conversation at our next meeting on potential changes, because that's part of the process. So if you would prefer, if you would instead rather polish it before it goes out, you could do that, and we will distribute it, and also I think we would post it on the website so it's a public document. I'd just leave that choice to you.
And, yeah, so I'm happy to pass it out. I'm happy to, nobody has to take it if they're not interested.
Okay. So, but once you pass it out, we do need to post it and treat it as a public document.
Thank you. Consider that, that I can respond.
Sure. Well, at some point, I would assume that the committee would want to take a look at it. Say, yeah, we don't agree, but we accept it, or no, we don't want it in there at all. That's kind of how we've done everything.
Chuck was looking for recognition. Sorry.
And next, you voted against the articles, and I think your view is important and should be available in an unvarnished way. I think we ought to have, a majority report that people on the committee support, they should sign, and there ought to be a minority report that clearly articulates reasons why, at least one person voted no. And I think that should be available to the public. And I think that having something that is kind of somewhat, on the one hand this, on the other hand that doesn't really reflect anybody's kind of real strong view, I think would be a disservice to the public. I think the public should see both arguments or both points of view in as robust a way as possible. I also feel like there isn't going to be a time when all the committee members are going to attend a meeting, and so people signing on to one of the 2, or there could be multiple minority reports, is a way to kind of get everybody really needs to take a position and do it in a public way, and signing on to one or the other to make sure that happens.
Okay. Brett, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to you. Okay. I just didn't want to lose Chuck's priority yet. That's all I was trying to do. Okay. Yes, Kevin.
To be clear, the version of the report that I'm working on tonight is the version that was sent out a couple days after last week. Everybody,
Yes.
There haven't been any changes
Yes,
since the one that we approved.
that's correct.
Which I would get off for it. We'll do it if you want to. Sometimes there's another version.
You're right, you're right. Very good point.
Copies of
So now I'm confused as to what the plan is, in terms of when I will see what you are proposing. So where are we at with that?
Well, Chuck mentioned the idea of a minority what did you call it, a minority statement? What is that?
Dissenting opinion?
The dissenting opinion.
Dissenting.
This is probably 2/3 of the way to doing something like that, but if it was going to be enclosed as a dissenting opinion, I would prefer to tweak the language, so to speak, from that point.
And it's your choice, Megs. If you'd like to hold on to it for a couple days, and then that's perfect.
Well, I'd be happy to share it if anybody's interested, but I would like to do more to it before making it officially part of the document.
Then why don't we share it with the understanding that it's a draft that will be subject to revision by you before it expresses your thoughts. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't write the word draft on it, but people could do that. That would appreciate it.
great. Okay. And if it can be noted as such in the minutes. Great, thank you.
The flip side to that is that people who voted yes are going to sign.
I'd like to see you guys step out.
Yes, I did. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
So I just had opened the version that was sent us with tonight's agenda, which is labeled version 2 and V2. Is that, and then the date is 5/19. Is that, in fact, the current draft?
It should say preliminary draft.
It
The
says
language you
preliminary.
used last time.
Okay,
Yes.
It says,
Yeah.
sorry, preliminary draft, I didn't think, but the title of the file is V2.
Yes,
That's why I was confused, I thought we were up to.
Stephanie sends the file, she may have sent it that way. As long as it says preliminary draft and 5/19,
We haven't.
it does reflect what we discussed in the last meeting, but otherwise it's not been further changed. Is that correct?
correct.
You shot, you pass that around for us? Thanks, man.
Other questions or comments related to the public portion of the meeting, which will commence in about 6 or 7 minutes?
You know who you are.
I'm sure it's so am I.
So I was just ignoring it for a while.
I was making sure.
No? All right. So hearing none, I guess we will suspend for just a few minutes unless there's more comments. One productive use we can make of our time with folks who are here. We have a sign-in sheet, and I'm going to ask people who wish to make comments to please sign in and indicate the community that you are from. I don't know how many people we're going to have tonight who wish to make comments, but it would help us to manage the flow of the meeting if you could do that. And it's right there at the corner of the table by Craig, so maybe we could pass that around. Kevin?
I don't know if I misheard you, but did you say you wanted to respond to something I said about the UID feedback?
I did. I'm wondering about the time, but let me give you a brief reaction. You're wondering what the best way is to circulate these comments. My sense is that we're going to get as many comments together as possible, and then circulate them in a distribution to the committee members sometime next week, schedule permitting. And we hope to include comments there from legal counsel and comments from the State Board of Education, and perhaps even suggested red lines for if those comments weren't changes that the whole committee would. Now, I expect that we will still not have gotten all of the public comments or all the board comments, but rather than just simply send out one batch of comments at a time, but we would try and focus the process that way. If that makes sense to the committee. Yes, Megs, go ahead.
Are we able to discuss before the meeting starts anything on the current report as it sits in front of us?
I don't think so. I mean, I think this agenda is warned, and as I said earlier, and you may not have been here for this, the primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to give the public an opportunity to comment.
Well, we've got 4 minutes.
And to give them, but we haven't warned an agenda item for a committee debate on possible revisions to the articles. And so I think that's something that properly we should warn before we take it up as an agenda item. And if somebody dissents from that, I'd be happy to consider that.
You discuss it without taking up the agenda items that this.
Well, at this point, given that we are this close to the public meeting time, I'm going to decline that invitation because I think it is, as I said, the primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain comments from the public. So. We have a thoughtful committee that usually fully engages. To speak, please. Thank you. That's great.
This was helpful. Page. It's easy to figure out where everyone's.
They're wonderful.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yes.
It's all they can do. Right now, Jericho people well, yeah,
I know, I remember that.
in our articles,
was when I wanted to
1%
see
here, and that's
I think it led some witness crowd to say I was fighting the taxes.
Yeah, so you've got to add Jericho number to the ID Jericho.
yeah.
I know that.
So he's saying that the version, and you hope there's more.
No ID.
No, but ID's gone.
We need to remember we have this. We needed to keep the new ID. So we like to.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. I don't remember one, but.
So you ready? Okay. So if everyone is ready, I'm going to start the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. We do have a sign-in sheet, and I ask those who wish to make comments, if you could sign in, it will give us a sense of how many folks are interested in making comments, and it will help all of us, commenters included, to think about the time that needs to be allocated so that everybody's voice is fully heard. For those of you who do not know me, I am Michael Marks. I live here in Richmond. I'm a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School Board, and I am chair of the Voluntary Merger Committee. We have a brief presentation I'd like to make, and then I'll describe our format for the evening, and then turn it over to you for comments. First of all, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. Not all of us are here. There's a list of them there. But if I may, I'm going to go around the table so that you can meet everybody. And please identify the community you are from. And of course, if you're not on the committee, your function within the committee. So Craig, may I start with you, please?
Yeah. I'm Gene Archibald. I'm a community member from Underhill.
Bill Fulton, I'm the community member from Underhill ID.
I'm Dave Thomas from Richmond, and I'm a community member.
I'm Harry Frank, community member from Huntington.
Diane Person-Littman, community member from Jericho.
Chuck Lacey, community member from Jericho.
I'm Andrew Rossacker, I'm a board member from Huntington.
And Andrew helpfully relocated so he wouldn't be blocking the presentation. So, John?
John Alberghini, superintendent of schools.
I'm Jim Massingham, I'm a consultant, I work for the committee, I do what they need to have done, and I do not vote.
And Jim, for those of you who don't know, Jim has long ties to this district as a former principal and superintendent.
And resident.
And resident, yes, thank you.
Paula Gerbian, I'm a board member from Bolton.
Kevin Campbell, board member from Underhill ID.
Dives Keir, board member from Bruce Keir from Huntington.
Now, I wanted to start out by emphasizing that the purpose of this meeting tonight is to obtain your comments, and if we can, to answer your questions. But in order to do that, I thought it would be helpful to provide a brief background on the process that has preceded us getting to the point that we are tonight, which we are soliciting comments on a preliminary draft of a report and proposed merger articles. This process is one that, in one form or another, has been going on for a long time. This is the second time that we in the supervisory union in this community have had an extended conversation about what governance structure to employ for our schools. David Ford, a consultant from the Vermont School Boards Association and a former superintendent, principal, and longtime educator, prepared a governance study in May of 2010. That was followed by a series of voluntary merger planning committees between August of 2010 and April of 2011. Some of those meetings were just of the committee itself, and some of those were community forums that were held by that study committee. There was a proposal that came out of that process for the creation of a regional education district. All of these things, of course, have acronyms, so it was instantly nicknamed the RED. And the proposal was that all the school districts in our communities, namely from Huntington, Richmond, Bolton, Underhill, Underhill ID, and Jericho, along with the Mount Mansfield Union District, would form a single school district to govern all education from pre-K through 12. Under the law that was then in place, in order for that proposal to be adopted, it would have required unanimous approval by each of the communities involved. It was passed in 4 of the towns, defeated in 2 of the towns, and it passed by a slight plurality if all of the ballots were combined. And because of the law, it failed because it did not have unanimous approval by each of the communities. Now, this process re-engaged here following a vote that was taken by each of the elementary school boards and the executive committee of the Chittenden East Supervisory Union to study a new option that is provided under state law. And that new option is to form a modified union school district. And to form that option, one would have to secure the votes of not all the communities, but of a majority of the communities in order to have that formed. Now, by law, this committee is obligated to consider all the options, not simply the one that it was charged with studying. And as you will see, we have engaged in a series of committee meetings starting last November and continuing through, I guess tonight is listed as well. Those of you who have spent time on our website will see that we have had many debates and discussions, and we also have a rather rich bibliography that we have considered of studies, debates, public comments, and newspaper editorials. Now we come to you tonight with a document that we have entitled a preliminary draft. It is not a final adopted document, but it is available and ripe for public comment. It presents a case for considering a merger, and it presents proposed articles that would implement a merger. And so, as I said, our purpose tonight is to seek comments on that. Now, as a background for you, just to understand some of the basics of how our schools function and are governed today, this chart shows the current population that we have of students in each of our various school districts and the total budget amount for each of the school districts. It does not include, I believe, the Chittenden East Supervisory Union on a separate level, does it? Okay. So Bolton, Huntington, Jericho, Richmond, Underhill Town, and Underhill ID are districts that are either K through grade 4 or pre-K through grade 4. And Mount Mansfield School District provides education grades 5 through grades 12. Now this chart describes basically what is a voluntary merger. There's a legal process that is outlined in several statutes. In essence, what it requires is this study committee to engage in a study, solicit public comment, solicit comments from area school boards. If we decide to go forward, to present a plan for approval by the State Board of Education, and if that state board approves, then it must be approved by voters in order to be implemented. And under the terms of the statute, if we go forward with a voluntary merger process under the modified option, it would need to be approved by 4 of the 6 elementary school districts to become a merged district. Now, this outlines in very summary fashion what the differences would be between what we now have and what we would propose to have if our preliminary draft became something that was finally approved. We would have a single school board that would oversee all school districts. All existing school boards would dissolve and their functions would devolve onto this new school board. The state would reimburse certain costs that we've incurred to study and also costs of transition for going forward to this new model. And under current law, there would be tax incentives for a period of 4 years. In other words, communities that approved would receive an 8-cent reduction in their property tax in year 1, 6 in year 2, 4 in year 3, and 2 in year 4. However, these are capped. They can't create a variation of more than 5% in your property taxes. Now, this chart shows basically what our organizational structure is today. Our organizational structure involves us having the separate elementary boards, 6 of them, which are responsible for decisions related to pre-K through grade 4, assuming that they offer that, although the new state law will eventually devolve that on all school districts, or K through 4, which some of our school districts, that is all they offer. Then there is the Mount Mansfield School District, which provides primary governance for students in grades 5 through 12. At some level, all of this needs to be knitted together to the extent it can be, so we are all part of a Chittenden East Supervisory Union, which has representatives from each of those school districts, and they in turn have standing committees that manage questions such as curriculum, negotiations, policy, and transportation. But of course, all of this needs to be ultimately funded and decided what will be adopted in terms of budgets at each of the school district levels. There is a superintendent of schools who is responsible for supervising each of these school districts, and also for supervising the principals and the teachers and support staff. However, the teachers and support staff are hired by their local school districts. Now, this is a chart of what in basic terms would entail if the merger were accepted. The communities would comprise a single union school district. There would be a single union school board from whom authority would flow to the superintendent down through principals, teachers, and staff. The board would have, as proposed in the preliminary draft, 15 members. Representation would be provided to towns based on population on a proportionate basis, but no town could have less than one member. Board members in each town would continue to elect their own representatives, as opposed to some districts have at-large voting for at-large representatives. So each community's voice would be preserved on this board. And all the local boards and the CESU board would, under this proposal, transfer their ongoing operations to the union board by June 30th of 2015. Now, in order for this to become our new organizational model, it would have to be voted upon and approved by the voters in November of this year. And this is our voluntary merger timeline. You'll note that we've outlined in yellow a couple of key dates. The vote by the voters as a whole would occur on November 4th, which is the general election. And there would be a budget vote under this proposal in town meeting day next March. Now, we have, as I mentioned earlier, tried to maintain a website with a lot of information. We welcome you to go there, and we also welcome you, if you choose after this meeting tonight, to just engage your local representatives if you have any more detailed questions. And one more comment I want to make before I close this and open it up to the public as a whole. There have been many questions asked about what happens if my community votes no. Well, the answer is that if a majority of the communities do not vote yes, then none of this would go forward. If your community votes no, it would continue to be a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School District, would continue to receive grades 5 through 12 services through that district. However, it would not be part of the decision-making on the pre-K through grade 4 decisions that are unique to the new modified union school district. Now, how exactly that will work out, I don't know, but that is the current draft that we have here, and it's something that is a work in progress. The hope of those who are supporting this is that they will make a persuasive case for all parties to join, but I understand that there's a lot of disagreement and different points of view on that. So with that, what I would like to do is take the sign-up sheet from you for those who have comments to make and start going through it to give you an opportunity for comments. So is that out there in the audience somewhere?
In each school board, next school board meeting.
Thank you for reminding me. There's another opportunity that folks will have to make comments beyond tonight. The school boards the school boards within our supervisory union are placing this item on their agenda. The Underhill ID district has already held its meeting, but each of the other school districts has their meeting upcoming. And so if you want to make comments to your local school board, if you just check the date of that meeting, which is available on the Chittenden East website, you will be able to do that, and that'll be another forum in which you can make comments. Okay? Sure. Come on back. We are done with the presentation. Go ahead. So I'd like to begin by calling on Duncan Keir. I'm not sure we've heard from you before, but I'm as a committee, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak. Duncan? Yes, please.
Quite fair, I think first. Sure. Sorry.
What down?
You know,
Duncan, you're from Huntington, correct? I apologize. Go ahead.
I know you focus on an awful lot of time, a lot of meetings. This is, after all, one of my big is forming a one board, 15 members, to govern pre-K through 12. All our schools. And we've lost approximately 30 student members. These folks are on their school board with their dedicated participants, particularly dealing with those 30 people, their perspective is lying. For the most part, we can say that voluntary parents and voluntary citizens continue to participate, but there's going to be formal loss, 30 people, many professional people, to help oversee the infrastructure, mechanics, property, building, to oversee and work with the principals of those schools, and also to lose 30 people to oversight of the administration. I think is now, during the study we read, committee members at that time came to each of the community, made presentations, and solicited comments. For some reason, I don't think that's happening. Merger timeline, I don't see that it is going to happen. I'm not quite sure why this study committee has chosen to not be more proactive in getting community participation. I think that would be now, as part of the study, full disclosure, my wife, Ben, has raised many important, very legitimate questions. And the pros and cons. Pros and cons of this merger. Many of these questions, I think, still remain unanswered. Maybe she's gotten answers to most of those questions, but my knowledge, many of them don't think. Some of them are unanswered. So how can you move forward with a merger with such huge impact if you don't have an answer to basic questions? It appears that many members of this committee are more concerned with the railroading process and completion without performing due diligence. And an outsider, I get that. Finally, I attended the Mount Mansfield meeting back in March, February. Legislative member from Underhill got up and made comments about the merger and said, and importantly, remember, we're going to have a tax bill to move forward. Now, I know the legislature has written into law that if we proceed with the successful merger, we will get property tax breaks. These are temporary, these are artificial, these are tax money that we are paying another means and they're coming out of the education fund, taking money legitimately out of two educational programs. I think it's disingenuous to use that as an important reason to move forward with merger. I think it's disingenuous to use that as an important reason to move forward quickly, so we don't lose for the country. Someone more educated about these matters than I even wrote publicly that this is nothing less than buying our votes. And I'm not a lawyer. Maybe you guys can answer this one. But isn't purchasing a vote in this country a illegal act? So I'm not opposed to the merger. What I am opposed to is steamrolling ahead with the merger. I think has a lot of unanswered questions and is based on a lot of assumptions and presumptions. Some people who really think this is the best thing for our kids want to ram too. I'm not sure that it is.
Thank you for your comments.
Michael, can I just,
Yes, Harry.
I was going to explain briefly what I'm doing.
That would be helpful. Why don't you?
So, what I attempted to do in listening to your comments, something was capture the central ideas, not keep the minutes, which are being kept separately. I thought I would just quickly read them back as a check, or you want me to not?
No, I think if you could just post them for the moment.
How about that? I'll post them.
And
I'll do that for each person that speaks. And if I miss something, we can make sure.
And we're trying to create, we're going to have a very detailed record of your comments, but we're trying in shorthand fashion to have your comments recorded immediately here in case they want to prompt some further discussion. And Nungan, if I may, just briefly, thank you for your comments. I think it's a legitimate and well-articulated viewpoint. The one caution I would have is to legitimize the viewpoint of those state legislators who, rightly or wrongly, have decided to offer incentives. If they were here, I think they would take some disagreement with the notion that they were bribing voters. I think what they would say is something like the following: that they see this as a public policy worth pursuing because they see having unified districts that can think about educational issues from grade pre-K through 12 to be worthwhile both for education and for spending purposes, and therefore they thought it a worthy expenditure of public money. Now, they may be mistaken in that, and our community as a whole may reject that viewpoint, but it is another viewpoint I'd suggest worth considering, even if you end up rejecting it. Now, next I'd like to call on Andrea Ogilvy from Huntington.
I have one good comment, and I put my name in there, and I crossed it off, and I put my name in there again. I was just interested in how this is going to be presented. I assume at some point we're going to go through the article.
If you have questions on them, you may go through them right now. We were not planning on reading them line by line, but if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
So your purpose is to collect public comment on the article that.
Yes, or anything else that's relevant to the subject. We want to open the floor to your concerns. And if you have questions, try to answer them now. If we can't answer them now, get a list of them so that we can get back to you and respond later.
Okay, I have a quick question on the instruction. Jim, at one point in one of the prior meetings, you had in the one place had an overstatement from and then that was pulled red and over. Is the structure here one that was sent on the slide in intro, it had, any school that goes independent would be under the MMUSD umbrella. Would there be a supervisory union code for that? So we have a supervisory union with the MMUSD with independent district or district?
Yes, sir. Sure, if you'd like. We discussed it both ways, with the umbrella being Chittenden East and the new district and any districts that vote no funneling into Chittenden East. And then we also discussed having the new district and any district that votes no funneling their elementary concerns and input into the new district. And the committee decided to go with the new. Yes. Yes.
And if I can elaborate one thing on that, remember the basic structure, if we go forward with this, is the proposal would have to be approved by the State Board of Education. So they have to weigh in on whether they see that as a viable structure or not. So until we have their answer, we don't know for sure, even if we went forward, what would finally be presented. Yes. Great. Thank you. So let me turn to Liz Lowe. Liz? Liz is from Richmond, for those of you who don't know Liz. And Liz, if I may, a long time and worthy school board member.
Well, yes, and I want to say that probably one of the few people, I know there are several others, but one of the few people that served on both elementary and elementary. So I've had experience at both the elementary school board level and at my current union school board level. And this is a background that I think is important to keep in mind. There are differences between the two boards. And so I have in my mind some questions again about how one board, 15 people, can cover all of the communication that goes on between school boards and staff and teachers and administrators and students. But before I really start my comments, Bob presented about 6 pages worth of ideas Friday, which I'm now seeing and they comments that he wants to know if those comments have been passed out to the other.
Yes, we sent them by email to all of the committee members.
Okay, so that you all have those.
Yes.
And he said if you didn't have them, he'd reserve the right to speak it as well, but I don't think otherwise. Anyway, he's spoken to peace with those comments, right? And he did have quite a few ideas on various articles. That's what. And so I want to start by saying that I am not in favor of a modified union district, and that would be formed if one or two of our members or districts say no to this enterprise. I believe there are too many unanswered questions concerning how a modified union would work fairness to all, and I think that we're getting ourselves into really a divisive mode. That kind of position is going to head with some schools in and other schools out. So I want to preface that. There are certainly advantages to a unified system, one which covers pre-K through 12. Includes all of our students. There are some financial efficiencies to gain, but I don't think we can count on those efficiencies to control future costs of education. There'll be a one-time step down of what we have to spend on a given year, but then the rate of increase is going to still occur as we move ahead. So this is a one-time sort of change that we're looking at efficiency. And as I understand it, they are about $300,000, $400,000 that could thing as a step down. That is basically 1% or less of our budget that we put on the screen. So it's not a huge amount of money for considering numbers. And I don't think that's the cost. That's what we all have to think about. A unified system also gives us flexibility in making decisions about where students attend and where teachers and staff work. But I don't think we can count on this flexibility also to control costs. It may be some savings as we move into an era where we're reducing teachers and staff, but again, it's going to be, I think, slight compared to what the full cost of education is. So I think costs should be considered, but it shouldn't be the main point of this. We need to choose a unified system because it makes common sense for all of us. So that's one point. Another point I want to make is we need to be careful about this one-size-fits-all kind of idea that I keep seeing in the articles as we move ahead. And it's, the standard curriculum that we prepare, the equal opportunity, wonderful to put that into words. It's harder certainly to achieve. And it also may not make sense when we have individual community goals. This program, this merger, this support and supplement individual community differences rather than make one size fits all. So we have to keep that possibility going. Article 18 does mention local input, but it really doesn't flesh it out at all. It says the school board will decide by June 30th or whatever how this is going to work, but or what's going to be involved, other than inviting the public, as everybody is invited to the family meetings and school board meetings and so on. Will there be some kind of school council or building committee that interacts or interfaces with the community? What kind of responsibilities do people have? How do they be selected? Will the principal work primarily with them? I mean, there has to be some kind of, instead of removing the people in the community that are passionate about public education, we have to include them. And I just don't see how that's going to be fleshed out right now with this document. I do believe that the committee's done a good job of hammering out the article, but I believe an affirmative vote across the board means that people need to understand the impact of changes. There needs to be some kind of, maybe not additional state to the articles, but some kind of public, how do we envision this impact to be? Will we be moving 6 students from one town to another? What are we going to, how are we going to change the lines? When are we going to do it? There's some details here. We want some of the lines changed to for the first year, but I mean, there's no real detail about what's going to happen when students make changes. And although you cannot anticipate what's going to happen, you need to have some overriding idea that when you need to make changes, you do. I just don't sense that we've got to that place, that we've been thoughtful enough to get to that. So with all that in mind, I asked the committee to delay the vote until town meeting, March 2015, so that we can have more time to thoroughly think about this and more time to present the pros and the cons. And with the hope that there will be only option at that time of voting for a unified plan. But this modified idea, even though the legislature has said it's possible, is not what we want to do. So in either case, whether you decide to present, go ahead and present this vote in November or in March, I really ask get the modified thing. Again, ask us about the unified plan, ask voters, and see what answer you get after there's been a lot of thoughtful communication.
The modified plan, as I said before, I believe is certified. It puts people, schools, to the wrong part of
Liz, thank you very much. So next, I'd like to turn to Helen Keir from Huntington. I'm sorry.
It's not here.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is literally written here. I apologize. Freudian slip, but anyway. Helen Keaton from Huntington, welcome.
Well, with a little bit, yeah. Hi, my name is Helen Keith. I am from Huntington, and I did help develop another website. So there are other articles on that website that actually caution people about the word consolidation, and it links directly to the website. But the reason I'm here tonight is to ask also that I really think it's so important that we have these discussions at the local and again at the cross-district level. And I would like to recommend that we have a facilitated planning process similar to what Addison Central did, where they did take the time to actually have a set of guided questions for community people, parents, staff, whomever, come together and take the time with a really good facilitator to collect the data and have the discussion that would lead to something like a merger or not. And I don't feel that the committee has studied it, because I actually, not nearly enough to talk about the pros and cons. The development of the articles, perhaps yes, but as I was looking at both the cost-benefit analysis that we have attached to this version and the cost-benefit analysis we've done 4 years ago, there's very, very little. And that was voted down last year. So I would just encourage people to take a little bit more time with that, because that's what I'm really looking for. I'm really looking for why should the little kids be merged with the big kids and give up the assets in the community when I'm not totally convinced that that's the right thing for the pre-K to elementary is to be uploaded. Maybe governance-wise, streamlining the lines of authority, that's one thing. But I'm really, really worried that the developmental needs of pre-K to grade 4 are so different from the older kids that they can get lost in the process. And one of the things that I saw in the cost-benefit analysis, and I don't know if I put it before 3 or 4 years ago, but the idea of moving teachers for little kids is like probably the last. And people might want to look at retraining or providing professional development of multi-age groups versus the idea of moving, unless it was the absolute last bucket. Same. But it makes me nervous that a smaller number of people be. I don't want to split in this or there. So the kind of cost benefit analysis that I would really like to see is what are the benefits to the pre-K? Yes, I see the benefits of having a student, but I compared the two cost-benefit analysis that for the most part, taking the red out and changing the language, it's pretty much the same. And there was a lot of more discussion that went on 3 or 4 years ago in the community where there was some meat in those discussions. And I don't really see that meat has been done. So that's why I think that the discussion groups are really, and I'm very glad that you all decided to have it. Some other things that I really wanted to say is that Act 153 from 3 or 4 or 5 years ago also uploaded the responsibility to the supervisory board and special ed and etc. So here there are, the supervisory union already has much of the responsibility. And I don't see why an action plan could just make it happen as opposed to a merger or consolidation. I think it's a myth. From everything I've learned, I think that there is the myth of cost reduction. This is in everybody's head. Even advocates of consolidation say, drop. You know, unless you close the school, unless we close the school, or there's not significant enough savings to do the kinds of things that we might like to do. And so we don't, you know, I'm not saying that that should happen at all, because I'd like to save every single school that their community wants to save. Because I think it's the heart of what goes on in it. I think the government is a big deal. I think hiring your principal and your staff locally primarily is really an important thing. I also think there's a complete myth that any decisions will reduce long-term our tax costs. And it makes me cringe to sell anything on that basis, that this merger and consolidation is going to save money and for taxes. Except for the bill, it gives us 4 years. Or I would go along with Liz saying we need to not have an audit. If it's going to go ahead, we need to have the study circles, the study discussions, come up with the big reasons why, besides solely streamline and solely trust us. Because, you know, when we say trust, and there's in here 3 or 4 times, and it bothers me that it's a hard thing to have a discussion. Somebody says, we just have to trust them. Of course not Mansfield is going to. And I don't know people that say that not Mansfield hasn't done it. But I want to open the discussion so that it doesn't feel so oppressive and such a railroad. I think good things could happen. Another thing that I picked up on is Article 20, and this wouldn't happen if the merger were voted without a modified merger. But that is, to me, seriously problematic, especially around special ed assessment. And I think there's some real legal issues there about having racial charges in the So, and I think I have a few more things, but I'm going to back off at this point and just basically go for delaying it, taking the time to really do a good job to get the community input and answering some of these questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments. If I may, just briefly, those are very helpful, as all of your comments have been, because you have been a faithful attender of our meetings. I just want to clarify a couple things for you to think about. They may not persuade you and may not persuade anybody.
Well, this is supposed to be a discussion, so I appreciate it.
Yes, yes. And this may actually be somewhat responsive to Liz's point as well. Why have we progressed to this point? Why is this even being considered at this point? What really was the impetus here? And it may be that some of the people who are proponents have misanalyzed it. Nobody has a monopoly on wisdom. But if you are to take their viewpoint seriously, it's good to understand it. And the viewpoint that's been advanced by many proponents in response to some of the points you have made is that simply relying upon a supervisory union to provide coordination and accountable governance is not effective in a situation where your governance is so fragmented and the primary point of decision on whether curriculum is implemented in the way that we would like it to requires financing and funding, which is made at the local board level. The real impetus, I think, for this coming to the fore here this time in this supervisory union was not simply a grab for a temporary tax cut, because the people who were the proponents to move this forward believed, rightly or wrongly, that the governance structure that we had was an impediment to thinking about how we would educate students from the moment they start in our system to the moment they graduate, and of course, how they succeed beyond. And the vision, if you will, that these proponents had, which may or may not be valid, but the vision that they had was that if we could gather together as a community, as we already have in the Mount Mansfield district, and focus together on a holistic basis to make those decisions, that we would be better served, both as taxpayers, because these proponents do believe it creates a more efficient system, but our primary impetus was for educational values. Now, they may or not be right in that viewpoint, and I think yours is a very legitimate viewpoint, but there is that other vision, and that other vision has been a driving force in the proposal that you see today. I don't ask you necessarily to be persuaded by it, I just ask you to understand that viewpoint.
I don't want to take everybody else on to talk. I have one or two other quick.
Sure, go ahead.
That you sparked for me.
Fine.
One of which is that in terms of the cost-benefit analysis and the what I would love to see more of, and this may, to me, it goes to the community and asking the community if the committee doesn't come up with it, which is how do you reach hard-to-reach children? So, and that to me is like the driver, or one of the key drivers. And it's not really expressed as, I mean, I couldn't really get a grab for it. So that would really, really help. And I'm not sure that the committee by itself can do that, but perhaps with community input. And this was kind of a bad joke piece.
Bad jokes are always welcome. Well, they provide some levity.
In here, there is a discussion about the finances. And I thought, well, you know, why don't, when you do transfer the responsibilities of the town treasurers, to transfer, I'm sure they would love not to collect the school tax. And you know, it's not a bad joke actually, because what that would do would be put the system in line with where that frustration, ability to resolve tax issues should be directed. And it's now misdirected to the town tax collector, the treasurer. And I think we need to unpeel the system whenever we can, so that people understand where it is that they need to go to talk to people about changing it, if that's going on.
Thank you.
So bad joke.
If there aren't attempts at some jokes, we never get any, right? All right. So at this time, I'd like to go to Joanne Conley.
I'm going to defer to I've attended almost every.
Then I'll come back to you when others have had a chance to speak. Great. Thank you. Edie Granning, did you want to speak?
I actually do.
Okay, so Edie, if you could introduce yourself. Edie's a member of the MMU board, and I believe live in Jericho.
I live in Jericho, and I'm currently on the MMU board. I've been on the MMU board for about 8 years now. I've backed up.
And Edie, did you also serve on the elementary board, I think?
I did not.
Okay.
So I've been kind of taking notes as we go on. I did serve on the red.
On the red committee, okay.
I did for that. That was good. So I just want to explain my experience with the group here. I think that different perspectives. Because I was a parent of a child right now in the middle school in Wednesday. As a parent of a child in the middle school, watching the 3 elementary schools come together in an active class to volunteer, still go on to speak. I can tell which is perfect because the elementary school techniques get the same curriculum, different resources, different ways, yet that's the same. And it makes it very difficult for that 6th grade year to get all the kids together to play. And I think that that's the piece that we should focus on here is what we're talking about. A lot of different things. We're not really talking about directly something. I want to make that, bring that to the forefront. Some of the kids have math help and a lot of different levels because that community may value it, but may not have the money to support it in their elementary school, where if everybody has the same pool of money, it would be better throughout all the students. All students would have, hopefully, a more level start. So that was one of my other piece, we keep losing students in the community. Our student enrollment is declining. Our number of teachers is declining. Our number of school board members is staying the same. I'm not sure that that's necessarily an appropriate ratio. So that's another way to look at losing school board members. It's just something that I was thinking of. I also wanted to talk about how people in the community can impact the schools if they're not on the school board. I've just recently joined within the last year and a half, and I'm new school board because my kids are now old enough that I can leave them home. However, I couldn't do the night meetings when my kids were at the elementary school, but I saw a need at the school. The school needed a playground. So some parents who were not on the school board got together, fundraised, built a new playground at the school. Separate from, obviously, the board said, yeah, great, do it. But separate from, it was a building maintenance issue, a grounds maintenance issue coming from the community. So I'm feeling like these arguments that fewer school board members is going to decrease, I didn't write the note down, but decrease the impact of the people in the community to the school. I'm not, in my experience, that wasn't the case. I just wanted to share that. I think we need to re-look at how we define the word community. We're looking at our neighborhood, our town, our school district, our bigger school district. And when we're talking about our community, we really need to look at the whole. And I think that we're missing that in some of these discussions. We're talking about my kids, well, they're all our kids. And it's all of our community. And we need a strong school system, not only for the parents of students, but for our community. We're talking tax hubs, we're talking home values, we're talking a great place to live. And so I think that that needs to be a part of the discussion as well, and not just kids at my elementary school. A couple more things, just two. The other one that I think is really important to me is not being able to get involved, feeling like there were things happening that I couldn't do because I couldn't do the evening meetings and all of that. And then I'm finally on the school board, and I feel like, you know what? I trust these people. They're saying the things that I would say. They're feeling the things that I would feel. Maybe not with the same words, maybe not with the same vigor, but all the points are coming up, and people with other perspectives that I didn't have are coming up as well. And I feel like that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be able to trust other people, to be able to make the decisions that I can't make for all of our kids and for all of our community. Because having been a part of on the outside and having been on the inside, I see that it's okay. And I feel, I was anxious, but I feel much better about that now. I feel really good about good people around here. My last concern, we're talking about not allowing a modified union. That terrifies me, because that keeps minority in control of the majority again. And that slows down the progress for the people who are ready to make that debate. And I feel like we can't allow minorities to control that. That's my 10 cents.
Thank you very much. So let me turn to Bill Frank from Underhill.
So, thank you for that preamble, because I am here to support the work of this committee and to support moving ahead with joining the school districts in our supervisory union. I think the preamble to this report places it very well in saying that the supervisory union is an entity whose time has come to end. At least in this area it has. We have, every time something comes up in the legislature about what supervisory unions could do or should do, Chittenden East has already done it.
I've spent a lot of time in the legislature the last 10 years listening to the pros and cons of what to do about school financing and school governance. And it is clear that it is time for us to take a new look at how we are going to educate our children, and specifically how we're going to govern the education of our children. And this plan is the right one. This is the right time to do it, and I don't think that delaying it past November 4th is a good idea at all. When this committee was first being reconvened almost, or started up again, I was in hopes that the vote could have actually been at town meeting. It's just that town meeting of 2014. But I think the extra time that this committee has taken to put together this document and to look at all the aspects of it is excellent. And this is definitely the right way to do it. Now, that is the overall thing. I support it. I can tell you many reasons why I support it. I've gone through the document and have all kinds of little notes on it. I won't bore you with these little notes. I'm not a lawyer, but sometimes I try to play one. But they're living in the ID district. I do have some specific things I'd like to mention about that little district and things that's in the document about the ID district. And first off, it falls into Article 9. And when I read Article 9, I immediately said, oh no, this is going to cause the ID district to vote against it. This implies we're going to close the ID school. Now, I don't want to close the ID school, but as somebody said, I don't want to close any school. But the ID school is not going to be closed. It's been discussed in Jericho and Underhill for who knows. The discussion started when Dave Thomas and I were on the school board. That was a long time ago. So the way that this is worded just reads that the ID district is going to go away. And I think people read into that, if the ID district goes away, the school goes away. Now, that is not what is meant by this, but I think that's how it reads, and I think we need to be very clear about what we mean in this district. Secondly, the statement that says it is expected that the legislature will consider dissolving the ID district. I'm sorry, the legislature does not dissolve the ID district. It doesn't do that. We have to, the ID members have to agree to dissolve it, take a vote to dissolve it, and all the legislature does is review that and make sure that all the T's were crossed and the I's dotted, and that everyone had an input, and then they approved the dissolving of it because it changes state statute, and that's what the legislature does, is change the state law. So it's not the legislature that is going to close the ID district. There's good reasons for closing the ID districts, and probably there may be some reasons not to close it. But one of the biggest complaints, of two complaints about doing these mergers, is number one is local control, and number two is closing schools. And any time we give any indication that either of those things might happen, then it's not a good thing. And Article 9 definitely reads that way. So I think we need to change that. We need to really look at this whole aspect of the ID district, and whether the people that live there really want to close it or not, and why they do and why they don't.
Rick, you have to leave.
No, you have to leave.
Okay, thank you. Chuck, you had a question?
So you know, with this vote, all the other towns will be dissolving their district. So Jericho is dissolving its district, yes, and the merger happens. So is Underhill, Richmond, all the other towns. It's just that Underhill AG can't do it on its own. And I agree that the language could be misinterpreted, but it is the case that all of the districts will be dissolved.
It is, but the point is that it's the people of the district that dissolve the,
Right.
dissolve it, not the legislature.
Right, but I just want to make sure, I'm sure you
Yes.
understand, but
Yes.
basically, it's not Underhill ID, it will not be the only district that gets dissolved, all
Right.
of them.
So the other point in here was a comment about what happens to elementary schools if they are closed and they go back to the town, except for the ID, doesn't have a town to give it to. And I would like to, if I could, ask the chair of the Rawson Library to speak about the comment about the ID school going to the Rawson Library.
Sure, and that would be?
Joanne Osborne, next one on the.
You're next on my list anyway, so please, come in. And you live in Jericho, but you chair the library.
Yes, I'm the current chairman
Yeah,
of the Board of Trustees.
Great.
So, anyway, what I would just like to ask a few questions about attachment C.
Sure, we'll do our best to
Library
answer
was
them if we can.
Specifically, listed there in name, and it was saying that in the event of the school district that they wanted to get rid of the real property, including the land and the building conveyed to it by the Underhill Incorporated School District, that it would go for the sum of $1. Like the other schools would go offered to the towns. If it was a Jericho Elementary School that was closing, it would be offered to Jericho Town.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be also the land, I'm assuming that the property is dirt.
Yes.
Stuff that the building is on. The question being because right now we have a 99-year lease from the ID school on which the Deborah Rawson Library is built.
When does that lease expire? Do you know, roughly?
The date, I don't know, it's about 83 years into it. It's a 99-year lease.
So it has about another 16 years to go?
16, no, like,
No,
80.
from 1995.
Yeah.
Oh, it started in 95, so it has another, okay, thank you.
So it has a good 75, 80 years left
Okay.
on it. And I was just wondering, a couple of things. If we bought that building for the $1, we get the land with it also. The land is not owned by the school district.
Well, John Alberghini, do you know who has fee title to the land on which the school, Underhill ID school sits?
They own a portion, they own the land that
That the school actually
Yes.
sits on.
Yeah.
Okay. What would then happen to the land that is being leased currently by the Rawson Library? Would that be included in with the ID school land that would be up for sale?
Kevin, would you like to take a crack at that?
Well, for that reason, that was one of the reasons why we elected to make the library have that, I call it the right of first refusal. If the new district ever decided that the Underhill ID property were no longer a valuable asset for the district, then turning it over to our tenant, the library, which is already a jointly managed municipality or district, right? The library is its own district, made more sense than flipping a coin and, Jericho and Underhill. So it was kind of like that makes sense. Now, nobody can predict what's going to happen, in the next 100 years, but being that the UID district's other neighbor is, Browns River Middle School, in my mind, it would be very unlikely that the new school district would ever consider that, building in that land ever being something that was not valuable to the school district. But in accordance with the template and guidance from the state, we had to make these provisions. So for that reason only, and why it makes sense, that's why we picked the library as that, $1 option.
Okay. What if somebody else happens to buy the ID school that was offered? What would happen to our lease?
It's a good question.
Well, I believe the first step would have to be and we can double check this with legal counsel, I am a lawyer, but when we have legal questions, we know that we need to have outside counsel advise us. So I don't make legal determinations for the committee. But to try and just give you a sense of that, as I understand this, and committee members can correct me if I'm wrong, if the determination was made to sell this, the first step would be it would be offered to the library for the sum of $1. And assuming this is one contiguous parcel, which I assume it is, just looking at the properties, and I haven't searched the land records, but if it's one contiguous parcel, your dollar would buy you that entire parcel. So you would have it within your control as a library to say, do we want this, or if not, then you would decline. Okay.
The likelihood of the library ever declining, in my mind, seems extremely low. So your question's a bit hypothetical, but I mean, and lawyers would have to tell us, but we could track that down for you, but I would assume it would be in your best interest to acquire the land for that.
And if you chose no, then it would be sold on the open market.
Right.
We have some sense of the likelihood of what your decision would be.
True, but I need to think about it.
No, it's a great question.
Thank you.
And if more come up, because this is something that we took up some time wrapping our heads around, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll try and walk through that. Okay? Thank you.
Michael, may I ask a clarifying question?
Sure. Go ahead.
And it pertains to the Underhill ID discussion.
Please. This would be a good time then.
I heard two different things, and so I want to get clarity on it. One is that the members of Underhill ID need to vote to cease the district, which essentially is what's happening with both proposals, I believe. The other topic that came up was closing the school. I think that's different than ending the governance of the district. And I think I heard the comment that members of Underhill ID would have to vote to close the school. And for clarity, I don't think that would be correct.
Let me see if I can provide some clarity.
If it moves forward, isn't it all members of the merged district vote to close the Underhill ID school?
There is a provision in Act 153 that states, for a 4-year period following the merger, any of the schools in the local communities can only be closed with the consent of that community, which has to be voted. So for the first 4 years after the merger, assuming Underhill ID joined and the merger was approved by a majority, that school could not be closed as a matter of law without a vote by the Underhill ID community members. Now, legally, at any time after that, it is up to the school board to manage the schools and decide, after input from the community, what is the best configuration. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. I either misunderstood comments that were being made, or
No, I had understood, and Representative Frank, you can correct me if I get this wrong, but part of your concern was that the article could be misread as implying that the school would be closed upon approval of this. Did I understand you?
That was what I read the very first time I read it. That's what came to mind. And when I reread it, I said it isn't that, but that's the.
And do you have the same understanding of Act 153 that I do? So now, I wanted, is this also on the Underhill ID question? Because I do want to get to Joanne Conley as well.
No, I just had a couple of other things.
Okay. So, Joanne, I've gone through the entire list, and I know you're on here. I did want to give you a chance to speak.
No one else wants to speak? Go ahead. I'm not on the list.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Okay. I'm Angela Luce, and I live in the Underhill Central School District. I also, for a number of years, served on that board, so I do have a kind of a sense of how the boards function. I share some of the concerns with the idea of losing the local influence on the school. one of the things that we did when we were on the board years ago is that we would hire teachers, and those teachers would be teachers that, for one reason or another, represented the goals and the priorities of the community. And so those particular teachers helped us to the goal of creating this sense of community. So if you go with this plan, very likely teachers will move from school to school, and you know that that sense of community for that particular community is going to, or elementary is going to change, number one. Number two, pulling teachers from one place to another at the high school level is a very different thing than to pull teachers from one place to another at an elementary school. These children are just a step away from being babies and being home with a mom or a dad or a daycare provider. And when you start pulling teachers in grades K1 and 2 based on year-to-year needs, it's a very, very different thing than for the high school. So I do share those concerns. I liked your comments. It was very soothing to think about the fact that it would help us have children all come to the middle school with on the same playing field. My concern with that is that if you saw a difference from this school to that school, and it was due to funding, and we're all from one, when you bring these kids up, and if you've still got the same number of dollars, you've got to bring these kids down. You can't provide, if you're leveling, you're bringing somebody down. So one of the things that I've noticed from being on the board and then from working in the school district for a lot of years, I worked in special ed, is that when they started pulling special ed support staff from school to school based on need, a lot of continuity and consistency went away for little kids. And it became not as nice a place to work when that happened. And I see that being a possibility with teachers. If, 3 years you're in this school and you're part of their community, and then all of a sudden you're in, the other side of the district, I could see it being unattractive to teachers as well as kids, but unattractive to teachers because of the effect it has on the children that they're serving. I also have watched a lot of homogenizing of programs, and it's billed as like we're providing consistency from school to school, and we're providing consistency from classroom to classroom. But when I saw that happen, I also saw a lot of creativity go away on the part of teachers, because they started having to look at these rules and regulations and standards over trusting their gut and trusting their intuition on how to benefit children. So I don't necessarily think that a merger is a bad idea. I know that the benefits, and I know that being able to move staff to some extent in order to make numbers work is a good idea. But I think that it needs to be done very, very carefully, number one. Number two, I think there needs to be some way for the elementary schools. I can see myself going and sitting at a Mount Mansfield district meeting where, no, that's not what it should be called, but this large board, and sitting there, and 2/3 of the conversation have to do with middle and high school, and this little piece has to do with my elementary kids that I care, that I'm focused on. And I lose interest and I stop going to the meetings. And as much as when I was on the school board, some days you'd go into a school board meeting and you look out in the audience and go, oh God, they're here again. The fact is, you need them there. You need those squeaky wheels to keep everything honest, not honest, but to keep everything reflective of what the community is looking for. So I think that some caution needs to be taken in terms of
maintaining these elementary schools to look like places that children are really just barely not babies anymore, are trying to function and thrive. Thank you.
John, without taking too much time, might you address from a superintendent's perspective the subject of individualized learning and where that's taking us and the incentives and the constraints it's imposing upon us?
Yeah, I mean, programming has become a lot, I would say mostly benefit, programming has become much more student-centered. So when a child comes into the classroom, regardless of what age they are, teachers in the school try to analyze and sometimes diagnose what they might need to be successful or move to where they need to meet standards or be on grade level. That's challenging, especially when you do have children coming from different places, and we do have a unified curriculum, but the resources from year to year, because there's a lot of stress on budgets, particularly from 2008 till now, that does create some inequity, and I think that does at times create some inertia that slows down some of that student-centered learning. The one other thing, if I could comment,
Please. More
moving teachers around. I've been at central office for 10 years, and Mount Mansfield as the model, we've moved very few teachers unless we absolutely needed to, based on a decline in student enrollment, or sometimes people want to change, professionally, and so they've requested a change. So we haven't had a lot of very few transfers from school to school over the last decade.
Liz?
That's just the kind of comment I think we need. The fact that although we have done it very rarely in the past 10 years, it would be advantage to us if we could do it once or twice in the next 10 years. I mean, we need, as a community, to feel that this isn't going to be usual. It's not going to be the norm, but it's going to be a possibility that we could use at last resort. So it's that kind of comment, I think, that's flesh out a lot of these arguments.
Okay.
A sense of restraint. Yeah. And that we don't need to do this often.
And if I may, Liz, one of the issues that I think the committee has wrestled with, and I'm sure the committee will bring me up short if I get this wrong, is what degree of specificity to insert in the articles. And the debate has gone back and forth. There's been a point of view, depending on the issue, that says we have to be very specific and clear and chart the course for the future. And then another point of view has been, wait a second, you can't understand the full implications of the future as you're sitting here in a study committee. What you really need to do is to create a structure with incentives and resources that over time will, as it confronts these decisions, make good decisions. And the committee will correct me if I get this wrong, but I think the sentiment that's reflected in this preliminary draft, and as of this moment, it reflects a majority of the committee, is that it made sense not to flesh out every potential decision, and instead to create a structure in which the belief was that a unified school board could and would make good decisions going forward. But that's the debate.
Well, I don't want it in the article, but I would want some public exposure to what we envision might happen.
Okay.
How often we might do this.
That's a valid point. Now, I know there's a lot of hands in the air, and I want to give those hands, including committee members, a chance to speak. But I want to make sure I don't skip over everybody who signed up. And Joanne, I wanted to give you that chance if you wanted at this point.
Okay, I'll take this as brief. I'll try to keep it short because I want you to ask your questions. I've asked a lot of questions.
For everyone, this is Joanne Conley from Huntington,
Yes,
who has been a
same
faithful
thing every
contributor
time
to
and I
this
forget.
committee.
Anyway, I'm here because I am passionate about education, both on and school. And you brought up some really very serious points. Some things you said, I didn't get your name. That's okay. I wanted to first, though, talk about local. Bill Frank, I hardly recognize you. It's been about, what, 18, 17 years?
About, yeah.
We met, we're at your house and you at ours. Anyway, local for adults is sure, it's all over the county, isn't it? Because every time I get in the car, I drive 30 miles. Or 30 minutes, right? Not 30 miles, 30 minutes, almost 30 miles sometimes. I mean, everything I do is away from my home. I consider the whole Chittenden County, or even parts of northwestern Vermont, is local to me, but not to little kids, and not to their families. You go to the schools that's closest to your house, playground, unless your parents want you to go to a private school, their choice, not the kids' choice. That's the parents' choice, and they have the choice. And you don't understand when people are afraid of losing local control. From top to bottom, our district is 40 miles from Jules Gore all the way up there. Believe it or not, we usually have some students from Jules Gore. And it's about 4 to 6 because it's not a rectangle. You can't figure it exactly. But we have anywhere from 200 to 300 square miles in our school district. That's not local. I know very, very few people up in Underhill. Only people I met at the very beginning because I was an adult and I went to those functions. You know, most of the people in our town would not know most of the people in Richmond. You don't see them. You get in the car and you go to where you're shopping and all that. So when you're talking about losing your school board members, we're far away from Richmond. I don't think that half the people in Huntington can name all the school board members in Richmond. It's not important to them. These jobs are everybody else's and they go about their business and do their jobs. It's not important that everybody in the community vote on things and do things because they've elected people to do that for them. So keep that in mind when you're talking about local and the fear of losing local control because yes, you will lose it. That's why I think that there's going to be a couple of towns, at least one, that's going to vote no. We don't need that. And that supervisory, Chittenden Supervisor Union is going to remain because it's not allowed to be separated. That's in the law, 267, 1967. And the other thing I want to bring up, this is serious business when you, being a volunteer, know by what they wear t-shirts, I'm from Huntington, or Bolton, or Jericho, and all that. I don't know how you know that. Because that shouldn't be public information. And as far as I know, I asked my husband about this several times over the years. Do they keep scores on the kids from the different towns so they know which kids are doing really well and getting a good education? Or, you know, are these just made up community rumors and all that? And I have to tell you that it's a little story, and I'll make it as short as I can. Before we even moved here, before my husband was even offered the job of superintendency, he came for several meetings, and at one of the meetings was an all-day affair, and he went around and talked to different schools and different committees, and they had a committee of, must have been high school students. And these high school students asked him some questions, and one question really stood out for him, and he told me about it, and it was a boy from Huntington that asked, what would you do if you were hired as superintendent to equalize the opportunities and change the attitude that Huntington people are down? That is terrible. And it was so on his mind, and then they all started talking about that a little bit. And my husband said, well, is that true of the towns? I mean, I'm not even from Vermont. I just know the towns had different personalities and popularity and all this. So I would sure check into that and make some changes because I've done that out in Nebraska where the parents came in to talk to the high school principal. The new high school principal was my husband and said, the superintendent's daughter And his 4 nieces are always the same girls that make the cheerleaders. Always. And what would you do about that? We're going to have different cheerleaders for each kind of activity. They could choose where they want to be, you know, cheerleaders for the football team or the basketball team or that. We're going to change that right away, and no one will be hired if they're a relative of a working person in the district. And that solved the problem. And they were really faithful. When we moved here, I met people at the school and I volunteered, and some people said, I heard you moved into Huntington. You got a house here in Huntington. I said, yeah. At least we're going to buy the house. It wasn't for sale right off. And why would the superintendent live in Huntington? Why wouldn't we not? I love this house, and this is where we think we want to sell. We get a chance to buy it. And so it's just not the wrong side of the tracks. And she wasn't complaining about money. She was saying that's who we are. I think that is just terrible. Another woman said, and meeting her within a few months, she said, I am so glad we've got a superintendent living in Huntington. Maybe they'll come to our board meetings once in a while. Now that's a bad reputation that has not gone on from the kids, from the teachers in Huntington or Bolton or wherever this is coming from, but it's coming from parents out there. And as far as I know, no one thinks that they're any less better than any other student in the 5th through 12th grade Chittenden Supervisory Union. They're all equal, we all love it, it's doing a great job. But when it comes down to the little kids, they need to be in a local school setting. It's close to babysitters, it's close to home if you should get sick, it's close to home if somebody needs some help, if you forgot something or anything. And it's safe, it's secure. That's what should happen for little kids. But I, off and on over the years, I didn't hear it for years and years after that. The last time you had a vote coming up was the first I got involved, was at the very, very end, just before you had the vote. And I was at a meeting and there was a discussion about who you were going to hire for the, I don't know, principal or assistant principal that. I thought everybody was there about the merger, but they weren't. And so a few of us were talking about bus riding that would happen if you started closing schools and busing people. And a lady from Jericho said, you know, well, my kids get on a bus too and they ride. It's just a little bit further. How close is it from your border to, you know, up in Jericho or wherever the school would have to be shipped to? And I said, well, we're 6 miles from Richmond, where I live, but there's another 4 or 5 miles. And they come up and down the hills. They're on a ride going up and down the hills, collecting a few here and a few there and all that. And so it's quite a ride for little kids. It's a long enough ride to get to Brewster Field, what I'm trying to say. And she said, well, I don't mind extra rides if my kids have to ride extra, as long as they don't have to ride with those Huntingtons. This was just 2.5 years ago. That's wrong. That's just elitism, that you know the answers, and there's no way ever that you should have any knowledge of where any kid comes from or how well they're doing. And it should never go outside the classroom. I'm a teacher, I've been a teacher at all grade levels from preschool all the way up through 8th grade, and I would not have anybody as a volunteer in my classroom that went and talked about any kid in the room. That's private. Well, I heard what I heard.
All right, so now there are some other hands that were up. Sir, yours was up first, and I apologize if I don't have the order right. Go ahead, your name is?
My name is Jim Rutledge. I'm actually on the Underhill IDs.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
I would like to underscore something that what Edie said. And I appreciate Huntington being in a totally different situation than Jericho, Underhill, and the Underhill Central. We have 3 elementary schools with 6. Well, yeah. So my point, I absolutely I agree. So while it might not be right for, I think it's been right for years in Jericho. I moved up here in 1992. My wife and I were flabbergasted. There's 3 elementary schools in the 6-mile district to serve so few students. If you look at the population map of those 3 buildings, in a couple of years we're going to be able to fit every student in those 3 schools in one building. We cannot afford to have that amount of unused capital. It's just not sustainable. It's all about sustainability. That is not sustainable. Second thing about community. Again, my kids grew up in Underhill. I live in Jericho, but we're in the AD district. I taught sports. I coached sports. I was in Cub Scouts. I was in Girl Scouts. My kids went to the AD school. They played on baseball with kids in Jericho. Played on soccer team with kids in Underhill. These kids, like within minutes of them meeting each other, even though they were from different schools, they became a community. They learned each other. They got comfortable with each other. They didn't feel alienated because, gee, I go to Underhill AD school. This kid goes to Jericho Elementary. But, I mean, they're kids. Kids are kids. They get along together. Their sense of community is playing. So while it might be the right thing for Huntington not to join, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, for me personally, living in Underhill ID district, it is the right thing. And I think the modified, unified approach is the right way to go because it gives Huntington an opportunity to maintain what they think is right for them. And it gives people in my area with my thing the opportunity to what's right for them. And I don't think we should force ourselves to start thinking on them. In Huntington, I don't mean to be them and us, but I don't. But conversely, I don't want to have a small one district interfering with something that I think 3 other districts feel very strongly about.
Can I comment on that?
No, I want to get
All right.
everybody a chance, and Joanne, then I'll come back to you. Because there are some new hands up, so with your indulgence, John LaRue, I think.
Comment on that.
Well, I'm going to go to the new folks who haven't spoken yet, and then we'll come back. John
I'm going
LaRue?
to the other side, so not everybody has to look at the sun all the time.
And John, could you? No, I
that?
recognize John LaRue.
I need something to lean on, so I'll come behind Bill.
And so John, could you introduce yourself?
I'm John LaRue, Chair of the Underhill Central Elementary Board. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board in part because we have not met. The legislature has decided that a school district with some in and some out is an okay educational opportunity. I don't understand their logic. I think they were wrong on that, but that's where we are. That the law is the law. So this tells me that those in our larger community that end up voting no are indeed voting yes for something. They're voting yes to be a part of if the other districts vote to make a modified union, they're voting yes to be a part of it, but as an independent district, as a part of it. So this document should represent that, in my opinion. I've read this document a couple times, and I talked to people who are on the committee, a few people, and to people that have come to some of these meetings, and I'm very impressed that there has been a lot of good discussion with a wide range of viewpoints given, and those have been distilled down to this report that's here. And I thank all of you that have been on the committee for doing this kind of work. I'm sure a lot of others have. But thank you for doing that. I do have some specific comments in the report on those
on the data that's listed for each individual school on page 4, beginning on page 4, the bulletin's on page 4, I would request that you put a projection for this coming school year in that table that's there. We have the data. Now, it should be clearly listed as a projection, but it gives more information, more clear information of where the population is going. And it'd be a good thing to do that. Article 20 talks specifically to those people who do not want to be part of the modified district, who want to be an independent district, whether it's part of Chittenden East or the modified district. The Appendix D speaks to that same thing. Unfortunately, those two things follow essentially the same ground with the different levels of specificity, and I think it's a danger that in any report you have two sections of the report that's talking about the same thing. So I would encourage you to put those together if you put
16
it all
16 and 20?
or separate the parts so that they're not coming to say no.
20 and abstract.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, John.
I like the way you did them, by the way. Page and articles helpful.
Appendix D.
Okay.
Now, further on those, I want to add my voice to the request that Article 20 and Appendix D be clarified dramatically. If a voter wants to vote to remain an independent district, that voter is not being given clear information of what he is voting for, he or she is voting for. So I think that part of the report needs to have a lot more thought put into it and clarify exactly what is going to be the status of that independent district, that or those independent districts. Right now, I think a reasonable interpretation of what's there is that we'll send you a bill. Don't worry about it, we'll figure out what the bill is. And that's clearly not the kind of relationship that we want to have with, if there is an independent district. I'm clearly one of those who think that it would be by far the best if we did not have one or two independent districts, if we were all together in a union, modified, if you will, in the union. There's a small point here, and this is because of I'm a board member. On page 20, there's $40,000 that comes down from board stipends, duties, fees, and operation expenses.
Yes.
How many board members get your share of that $40,000? I'd like to see a hand on that. Anyhow, my request there is divide those up so that the public can really see what you're talking about there. It implies that some of these board members are taking home big chunks of something. That's me. On page 21 is a table that's the kindest thing I can say about it is it's misleading. It clearly is confusing, and I think it totally gives the wrong impression of what might happen. When you present two or three possibilities, as is shown there, you're saying, this has some possibility of occurring, this has some possibility of occurring, or this has some possibility of occurring. I don't believe that is a valid interpretation. I don't think that the larger schools are likely to be the ones that are chosen to be closed at any point in time.
So, John, so I can understand your point there. Is your point that there should be a presentation that assumes a small school is closed, or?
Well, if you look at this table, you can see big numbers.
Yes.
$23 million, or, gee, the average is $1.8 million.
Yes.
Or, all right, take the net out of the bottom, $1.25 million. Well, it's not an honest representation in my opinion.
So we should revisit that.
Pardon?
We should revisit that in your judgment.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that needs to be dramatically restructured. And I have another one someplace. It's near and dear to my heart. I think it's on page 18. It's on page 15, yes. At the very bottom, in the second from the bottom line, towards the 3/4 of the way towards the right end of that line, it says budgets would be prepared at the school level, but would be encapsulated into one school district budget. And that's good. I would request that you add a clause, if you will, or it could be a new sentence if you want. It says, such school level budgets will be published annually in a manner similar to those currently practiced. And this speaks to the local control issue. If you know what's going on in your school, you'll be able to have a discussion, you'll be able to be involved in that discussion about your school. People are still going to be interested, as somebody commented, that their focus, their interest in the school district is going to be highlighted by where their student is. Other members are going to be, their interest is going to be highlighted by what's in their local community. But the only way they can know the financial aspect of what's going on there is if it is presented to them and not covered up some way. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now, there are, from my recollection, there were 3 hands raised by people who had not yet spoken. Each of them were committee members, and I'm going to go to them in the order that I spotted the hands. If your comment is no longer needed, that's fine, but the first I spotted was Chuck Lacey.
The time has passed.
The second was Meg Skier.
I wanted to comment to, I forget your name.
Oh, Jim.
Jim. The issue of the too many schools in the northern end of the district is an important one for folks, whether they're in favor of this particular merger or not. The state provided several merger options. It provided the modified union as one option, which is what this committee is considering. It also provides incentives, same incentives, the same tax stuff, to do an elementary merger. And this committee chose not to consider the elementary merger. But that option is out there if people find that they would rather have, rather than a some in, some out district, that they wanted to have the elementary districts merge. That vote could happen with another study committee studying the pros of that. So I just want you to be aware that even though this proposal doesn't discuss it, that is an option that's very viable, and it might be the solution that would keep everybody happy. I don't know.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, delay is when we can do it.
Well, unfortunately, the committee chose not to discuss that, but. Yeah.
Well, if I may, Meg, in fairness to the committee, I think other committee members might articulate something different.
They probably would.
They would say that they considered that and did not think it a preferable option because one of the primary goals that they advocated for was that students would be best served if there was a continuous evaluation of their needs from the time they enter the system till the time they leave, and a continuous allocation of resources to meet those needs and also to address taxpayers. But that's a debate.
It's a long debate because there are at least 2 points I could make against it, and I think it should be debated publicly.
Okay? Bill, you're next, I believe.
I was just going to say that we were tasked by our boards to look at this modified union district, not to look at an elementary district, not to do other things. This is what we were tasked with. Our job is to say yay or nay that this is a good idea. A lot of these other questions, we've had some great questions tonight, but a lot of the questions that we're getting are better served at the local boards. A lot of these ideas are great, but are way out far of what we are tasked with, the authority that we have given to us to meet here and do what our boards told us to do. And it really puts us off topic when we don't stick on, this is what we were told to do. I'm all for this. I will come out publicly and say I think this is a great idea. I'm from Underhill ID. We're in the same boat, 6 miles away, 3 elementary schools, and this is what we're tasked with doing. Talking about what we might be able to do or could do has nothing to do with what our school boards asked us to do. And I think it really convolutes the debate that we should be having. Just me.
Thank you, Bill.
I was sent here as a school board member to study all the options, so I was tasked to study all the options, just to make that clear.
Now, Helen, thank you, Meg. Helen, you've had your hand up, and I apologize. It's been a while getting to you. So go ahead.
I have 4 other points. 2 of them have to do with data, and it has to do with decision making. We're making decisions based on the data.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the data that I feel that would be helpful that we don't have are the enrollment projections, not just for, and thanks for bringing it up, not just for next year, but what about the enrollment projections for 5 years and 10 years? I think that is data that could fuel more of a pro support or less. You know, I mean, it's just. So
would you like an answer to that, or did you want to go through all your points first?
If they're there and if people are going to use them, that's great.
John or Jim, do you want to respond to the query why there's not data for years going forward?
Several years ago, when I was superintendent, I believe, but maybe it was when I was curriculum coordinator, boards wanted to know about student population projections 5 and 10 years out. And we did bring on board a paid consultant who was an expert in this field. And the answer was, our communities are too small to make a prediction that has any degree of accuracy. So it's not there because the experts don't feel it's there. You may disagree, I can see it on your face.
Yeah, I do, because I used to do those projections. But anyway,
I
just came out of a graduate course at UVM, another one, where basically people were saying they knew that they were going to be under-enrolled and have a serious enrollment problem for the last 17 years. So I do think there is a way to use, it doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all, they're just pieces of information with some footnotes next to it. It would be helpful to see the trends. So thank you for that, though. I mean, at least there's a rationale, but nobody has said that before. People have just not said anything, so.
That's not true.
Well,
We had a long conversation about this.
Well, Chuck, if I may, I'm going to come back to you to respond, but I do want to give people a chance to get their points out there, and then if there's a disagreement, we can address that. So go ahead. You had at least 3 more points to make.
I just haven't ever had anybody say that's not true. So anyway, unfortunately, the second thing I was hoping for in terms of data would be a listing of the assets and liabilities for each of the school buildings. I think it's really important for people to know what kind of assets are being transferred in and what kind of liabilities, debt loads are coming in. It's just a piece of information that I think would be helpful to look at. So those are 2 sort of data things. Then certainly qualify the enrollment projections as only a piece of information.
The other two things were, have to do, and a little taken aback here.
Take your time.
Will MMU be asked to change its school district, in other words, on the ballot? Will MMU school district have to give up its delineation to become a pre-K to 12? And so there's another question that will end up on the ballot.
Would you like me to answer that question? Because I think I can.
Yeah.
The MMU school district does not have to separately vote on this question. If 4 of the 6 elementary school districts adopt this, then they will automatically become part of the modified district without a separate MMU vote. And that is how the statute is structured.
So that they don't have to weigh in on whether they want the debts or the other responsibilities.
Well, that's a different question. Now, the different question is whether or not there is a discussion that involves the board and the MMU community. And there is a discussion that involves the board, and the MMU community is comprised of the same voters who will vote in each of the elementary towns. It's just those voters do not have to cast 2 ballots, one that says, should we form the modified unified union school district, and secondly, should in that case MMU also assume those responsibilities. The second question is part and parcel of the first under the law.
And does not need to be on the ballot.
Correct. It's not in separate. It's not a separate vote on that.
That's what I.
Yes.
And then the fourth thing was, when I looked at all the minutes, and I looked at pretty much, and the minutes don't reflect everything that goes on in the meeting. But
although, for the record, we have a wonderful minutes taker.
Well, I don't want to negate that, but I meant all of
I hope that will be reflected in the minutes. And your patience.
She's on top of this. Amazing.
And your patience is so admirable. So, go ahead.
So the other, in my looking at the school board, when they approved the budget to hire Mr. Messingham, the proposal to those school boards wasn't really about whether there was a discussion possible about elementary union versus pre-K to 12. It was presented as pre-K to 12, the way I read it. So I just want to reiterate, and I actually haven't talked to Megs in probably a month or so, but I really do think that there could be a way to address a lot of the stuff, with the concerns that we have about teaching and child development for elementary schools, and the concern that uploading the little kids into the big system might release the kind of attention that is needed for the elementary schools with pre-K to 4. So I really do support if there were a way to open that up, that discussion.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chuck, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time speaking to you about that issue when we got together. MMU has, through the years, and the district has made some projections that have been colossally wrong. First, underestimating the number of students who would be educated, and then underestimating the number of students. And then overestimating. But I don't think we would look back and say we should not have established MMU because we didn't know precisely or we didn't know about the projections going forward. I think what we're talking about is a governance district that we hope will be more agile and more able to address fluctuations in student enrollment going forward.
Thank you. Now, I want to see if there's any more. Yes.
Just, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't made up my mind one way or the other. I'm just listening and expressing my concerns. But I've heard somebody say that this process would save about $300,000. Okay, but that would only be a one-time fix. And that doesn't make sense, because if you take this budget and you drop it by 300,000, that 300,000 is a savings every single year. Your rate of increase might continue to be the same as what it is now, but that 300,000 is saved year after year after year. It's just, I think that it was minimized more than is realistic. It continues to, if I'm correct, it continues to be a savings. Yeah.
John, if you could just weigh in here, please.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's you could compound it even at inflation over the years, and you could project what your savings would be, you know, in a decade. Of course, there would be some other costs that might take the place of the savings, and I think some of the folks that were here tonight were talking really more about what's happening at state level, and not necessarily being able to predict what the statewide property tax rate is going to be or what the funding formula is going to look like.
Well, I think we're still going to hate our increase in taxes, no matter where we
Right.
start, whether we're starting down here or we're starting up here.
Yep.
But the point is,
You're right
I
on.
don't think there's any pretending that there isn't a chunk of savings that goes for.
You are absolutely correct.
Thank you. Are there any other comments to be made? I mean, I appreciate your patience on a warm evening. We've had 2 hours of great engagement, but are there more to be made? Diane?
Hi, just a couple of quick things. One, when we were talking about some of the local control issues, I heard something about schools hiring teachers or hiring principals, and it never occurred to me that a school or that community would not continue to hire their own principal. But the fact that you brought it up made me wonder if we need that level of specificity in some kind of document. But as a committee member, it never occurred to me that that would not continue. Also, sometimes as we talk about this merger thing, everyone forgets every town will have representatives to this board. So it's not as though that your voice is going to be lost. You have it through those representatives. In terms of local control, I do get a little concerned because what we're talking about is a single board that's going to look at pre-K through 12. We're not talking about eliminating the ability for all of the wonderful volunteers, such as we saw at our CESU spring meeting when many of them were honored with their Golden Apple Awards. Principals and those volunteers come into the schools. It's a contract between the community members, the teachers, the students, and those volunteers, and that principal. It has nothing to do with the board. The board doesn't do anything other than our CESU policies, which allow some of this stuff to take place. But that kind of energy will continue to exist. That wouldn't go away. And so I don't know how to address that kind of thing if that's still a concern. Another thing that really concerns me is that as I look out here today, it's a lot of the same faces that have come before us in meetings. We're missing teachers. We're missing principals. We're missing a lot of folks who maybe are too busy to come here, but have been talking to me about completely other issues than the kind that are being brought up right here. And I worry about that voice being lost as we're having sort of the same discussions about the same types of issues. So I do think that we need to know sort of where to go from here to gather that group. We have certainly published this from hither and yon. We've had these discussions. We've had our meetings open. And so I get concerned that there's a huge voice that we're missing. And I also wanted to mention, and I'm happy to talk with you, Duncan, you said there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. And I think we have to be very careful about whether those questions are answerable or whether the answers that will come out won't make us happy. And that's another piece. We all have to kind of admit where we're at with that we may not like the answers. So I want to have that discussion, and I've already said I'm open to people calling me from any community, and I will show up at anybody's board meetings.
Can I respond to this?
Thank you. Yes, you may.
Yes.
And then I'm going to, there's some other hands up.
If we were to look at what people were asking for, which is to project out what might happen in the ultimate, not necessarily putting it into the legal wording of the articles, but given that the loss of local control is important, it would seem to me that there should be a facet of the report that's not in the legal language, but then goes into exploring what what are the variety of ways that a district might be allowed to have this local influence without interfering with the process. So, you know, a very wide range of options that would be a menu that going forward might be looked at, doesn't pass anything in concrete, but it maybe for 5 years we'd like to have a little committee that meets with the principal to provide our feedback, and then we change it, and then we might want to have some different sort of thing. So coming up with brainstorming some ways that feel comforting, that are real, where we can feel like we're keeping our little elementary school a place for little tiny kids to start out.
Yes.
I'd just like to make a couple comments to things you've said, Angela. What you just now said, I think, could happen, and it would happen automatically. I mean, there's so much involvement, and I think that it would not be something that the new union board would want to legislate. It would happen naturally within the schools. And it might be different in one town than another town, how the people got involved. But you better believe they would, because we know they all would. The other thing was that I really liked what you had to say about your experience over the years at the Underhill Central School. And I've been concerned about teachers in this whole process. And the two things I want to say about that. One is, I don't know if people realize that there were so many districts, 6 elementary districts, when a teacher moves from one district to the other at the elementary level, she or he loses all his or her seniority. And it has been happening, especially as enrollment goes down and they've had to move some people. Not fair to the teachers. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I don't think it's such a really bad thing to have to shift a bit at a level. Say you've been teaching first grade and you've done it for 5 years and you're in the same school, and for some reason you need to teach third grade. That's very reasonable. Lots of other school districts do that. There are very built-in sanctions on teachers because you have a secondary certification or an elementary certification. There's no high school teacher that's only certified at the high school level that's going to be put into first grade. It's just not going to happen. So those are just things I want to say.
Thank you. Harry?
So I live in Huntington, and I actually support the merger. And I hear a couple of thoughts. I'm torn because, you know, like all of us, I identify with my town, and I served on the board there. I was actually a teacher, and I'm an assistant principal in a school, not in Chicken. And I currently work for the School Boards Association, so I talk to people around the state who grapple with this same tension. And I don't think the issues here are particularly different than they are anywhere else. But when I look at and this is not just Huntington students, but when I look at our albeit limited assessments of our students' learning as they go through our schools, like pretty much every other school in this state, we have a dramatic discrepancy between boys and girls, and we have a dramatic discrepancy between wealthy and poor kids. And I find that hard to abide by, and so it leads me to a question, what do we do differently? And not only do we have data as they go through our K-12 system that's troubling, we have data that once they leave our system, they're not gaining the kinds of skills and opportunities that they might get from college completion. We have an extraordinary high school graduation rate in the state, highest in the country, roughly. Of those students that graduate from high school, roughly half go to start college. And of those, roughly half complete in 6 years. If we look at what employment opportunities are going to exist for our kids in 5 years, let alone 20 years, the lack of a college degree will be an even more dramatic limitation on what we give our kids. So I support the merger because I don't think there are actually good answers to all the questions that were raised. I don't think we know. I don't think we can say we are going to get every kid to where we want them. We're going to save money. we're gonna be more efficient. I don't think there's nobody that's done it yet. And so there's a lot of good evidence that this doesn't improve things. But there's also no place in the country that actually looks anything like Vermont. Well, that's probably an overstatement. Vermont has more board members, or a lower ratio of students to board members than any other state in the nation by fourfold. So, were we to go from roughly 50 board members in this supervisory union to 15, we would still have, if everyone in the state did something roughly equivalent, we would still have we'd still have fewer students than board members by a factor of 2. Yeah, it's a loss of local control in the sense that the board becomes the mouthpiece for people who want to volunteer, who are unhappy about something, who have great ideas. But in truth of the matter, that's actually not what a school board is supposed to do. Now, we do need vehicles for that kind of community relationship with our schools. And again, I don't think there's a clear and simple answer. There's no school, there's no community in Vermont really, or in the country that, well, maybe that's an overstatement too. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And local boards, as we have them, have an extraordinary function in our communities right now. So we are going to be giving up something, I'm convinced. And the challenge will be to create something that's better. I just think if we look at what's happening for our kids right now, it's hard to defend what we do. To say we shouldn't change anything. And again, I'm not sure, I'm not trying to be the last one on this, I'm not sure anybody could say, if you change the governance system, every kid's going to reach proficiency. And every kid's going to go and complete college. I think that probably would be quite naive to say. On the other hand, if we were to draw analogies with organizations that accomplish what they set out to accomplish, they don't have 6 boards governing their function in somewhat isolated dimensions. So my final thought for you is this. I actually think Huntington has an enormous amount to contribute to this supervisory union. I think every school and community has a lot to contribute to each other. And I find it confounding that we don't look there and say, what is it we could actually contribute to each other, as opposed to what are we going to lose? We're going to lose things. We're going to lose some level of what we experience now in our relationship with our school. And I struggle with that because I like being on the board when I was there. And I like knowing people on the board now. And I don't find it an easy decision to come down on, but I also think it's a question we need to make a declaration about and move to a different place. So,
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments? Well, thank you all for your patience, your vigor, your thoughts. I'm going to close the public section of the public comment section of the meeting. And we have one last item on the agenda, which may be very brief, but it's simply entitled Other Business. Any other business before the committee?
Can we just review the next couple of weeks and what we're trying to get done at our next meeting? We clear what we need to do between now and then to get what we need to get done on it. We've got comments.
We will have comments from the public, we will have comments from legal counsel, we will have comments from the state, we will probably get comments from more boards. I certainly hope we do. We already have Underhill ID. We'll present them in at least one package, although if things come in later, it might be 2 or 3 to all the members. And based on that, at our next meeting, we will review our timeline, and we will also review a potential revisions to the articles for submission to the state, or if we choose, comments were made to potentially delay the process. We'll have to decide that as a committee. Is that a fair summary, Jim and John?
We're going to vote, is true.
Excuse me?
Yeah, we're going to set the stage.
Should I make comment on the
Please, go
calendar?
ahead.
So there's two new bits of information that affect the calendar. One, if we know that we're gonna move ahead shortly after the primary in August, we can submit our ballot to the state and get on the state ballot. That's a little sooner than I thought we could, but we do save the district the cost of printing ballots and doing that locally. The other thing that I learned, that I'm surprised to learn just a few days ago, is that there will be no July state board meeting. So the urgency to prepare for that July meeting is no longer as urgent. So I'm gonna look at the calendar again for the next meeting.
So do we have meetings scheduled to take advantage of that?
I don't believe we do yet.
Okay, so it seems like we ought to schedule those. And the other thing is,
That would be an agenda item for the next meeting, talk about the schedule. And if so, what that's.
okay, although we're gonna have lower attendance, the more lead time we give people, the more likely. But the other thing is, how do we're not gonna have everybody attend the meeting. So how do we get to the point where we all vote on, everybody's vote is recorded?
We just need a quorum.
Yeah, I don't think we might not be able to get everybody vote recorded. When we do vote, that'll be the people that get to vote on the articles or the majority.
Can we have a process where people sign on to a majority opinion or a minority opinion? I think each of us need to go on record as being for or against.
People can go on record, but there's not a legal process for proxy voting. You and I may have engaged in this, and I apologize if I didn't communicate. There's not a legal process for proxy voting on a legal action that a committee must take. So as a matter simply of public knowledge, let's say one of us couldn't be at the meeting, but one of the communities know their views, you can publish that I supported or I opposed. But your vote doesn't count unless one of two things happen. You are there, or we formally organize a meeting with electronic participation. And the advice of legal counsel is you only organize a meeting with electronic participation if you are confident that your technology allows for participation. And having participated in one meeting remotely, I can tell you that our technology would need to be substantially
So can we make a
upgraded.
distinction between a vote and signing a majority report or minority?
In order to adopt something, we have to have a vote, but people can still sign on, and we can indicate that while they may not have voted, they are in support or they are in opposition. Does that answer your question? Yes.
If a representative was not able to be there at a voting time, could they send an alternate in their place?
There can be an alternate, but the alternate must be appointed by the appointing authority. In other words, the Bolton School Board would have to appoint an alternate to you. The Richmond School Board would have to appoint an alternate to me because they literally appointed me to this matter. And they need to do that in a public meeting.
But if there's an alternate that's already been appointed by the school board, that person can vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
So,
Which school then were you?
Archie Science.
Curious. I got a law degree and my wife got public college, but that's another story. Any other questions?
When's the next meeting?
Our next meeting is on the 19th, isn't it?
16th.
16th, I apologize.
So when we're gonna be sending feedback, really when we get it from the boards to you folks, so.
John, I think we're gonna try and do at least one aggregation, so you're not buried with 100 separate emails.
Thank you.
We'll try, I just worry that we're gonna get some late, and I wanna give people time to read them.
We will do that.
So we'll do the best we can to get a list together, but you may get a couple lists.
I just just don't want 800 emails.
Oh, no, it won't be anything like that. Maybe 2, 3. Time and place.
That's office 4:30.
CO 4:30.
And then, that's our last scheduled meeting.
That's
Right
right.
now.
So we'll discuss, part of what we'll discuss is for the schedule.
I just want to make sure.
Everybody loves more.
So is there anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for your hard work and patience.
Thank you. Well done.
Pick a suspect. I mean, literally everybody. Thank you, very patient.
Demographers were
Just so you know, Max, I read the whole thing. No, after you handed it out, I went out in the parking lot. The catches on the school grounds, I'm in trouble. I had a cigarette. It's literally a meeting. I read it in my truck. Exactly. Yeah. For sure. And I didn't use it to light my cigarette, so I actually did read it. The draft, as it were.
They don't know what they're talking, they kill you. We've tried.
Excuse me, I'm just gonna go drink a lot of wine. It's here. I was